The New Deal began with an event called the First 100 Days. Essentially, this was the first 100 days of President Franklin Roosevelt's first presidential term. He was voted into office with the assumption made that his platform would provide for more federal assistance in the form of direct government intervention. Roosevelt took action, signing in a great number of his famous alphabet agencies during these first 100 days. Among them were the Agricultural Adjustment Act and the Civil Works Administration, which we'll talk about in a minute. Congress, not just Roosevelt, helped to pass many of these new acts and offices as Democratic congressmen anxiously exercised their newfound powers. Roosevelt's first New Deal was primarily focused on providing immediate relief to the American people. Primarily beginning with this Banking Act of 1933, Roosevelt sought to relieve American society from its current panic. The Banking Act itself gave the federal government power to regulate both the banking system and foreign trade, thus jump-starting those banks that had survived the initial crash and giving hope to other areas of the economy. By first providing aid to the banking system, Roosevelt helped restore American confidence in the banks and in their money. As his next order of business, Roosevelt maneuvered to provide assistance for the unemployed, which had reached over 25% by 1933. He passed the Civil Works Administration, an office designed to put the unemployed to work for the federal government. The CWA hired men to work construction for the government on projects such as airports and roadways. Similarly, the Agricultural Adjustment Act worked with farmers in an attempt to stabilize the agricultural market. A few months later, the New Deal changed its focus to the issue of Social Security. Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act in 1935 to provide further relief to the American public. This act, which was later transformed into the Social Security Agency, provided benefits for the handicapped, unemployed, elderly, and pregnant. While its constitutionality was challenged, the act survived and developed into the form of Social Security that we all know today. All of the acts and offices created by Roosevelt's New Deal were extremely controversial. It separated the country almost entirely into two groups, conservatives and liberals. The conservatives heavily opposed the New Deal because many of its policies led to direct government intervention in the economy. Conservatives believed that this intervention would corrupt American society and would ultimately lead to a prolonged depression. Liberals, on the other hand, were primarily made up of traditional Democrats, immigrants, the unemployed, and low-income families. These groups supported Roosevelt and the New Deal because its government intervention would provide them with the assistance they needed. This split in ideals led to a drastic change in American politics, separating the country into either the groups of liberals or conservatives. While the New Deal did do a great deal to improve the economic conditions in America and the living conditions of low-income families, it did not solve the Great Depression. All of the acts passed by Roosevelt and Congress under the name of the New Deal did not ultimately bring the country out of its depression, but it did improve the country's condition. Many historians argue that it was in fact World War II and the rebirth of the war effort that pulled the American economy out of depression and back into prosperity.